What is up, gamers? We've got the GM Nightfall rotation kicking off next week, and today we're going to look at what adept weapons you can look to get from those GMs, as we've got two new-ish, returning-ish weapons. Let's break it down. Hi! Really quick, this is post-editing the video, the lights, and I kind of rip into all of these guns a little bit. Not all of them, but a few of them. This seems a pretty easy game. You could use whatever guns you want. You'll do okay, yada, yada, yada. I mentioned that a little bit in the video, but I just was really ripping into some of these things a little bit, and I wanted to get that little disclaimer out of the way. GMs are really fun. You should go do GMs whether you want to farm the gun or not. You just don't really need to be stressing about rolls so much this season. So that out of the way. Hope you enjoy. Week 1, we're going to be seeing the Proving Ground Strike, and that'll be dropping the Jury SR4. Jury is a gun that's been around a while in quite a few different iterations. As it is currently, it is so close to the point where I'd care about it, use it over some of my other favorite kinetic scouts, like Nightwatch and Servant Leader, but not quite there. It's 180 RPM precision frame kinetic scout, and kinetic primaries did gain a net 5% damage to unshielded enemies with the launch of Nightfall that Jury will be benefiting from, so that's neat. You'll also see scouts getting a 10% buff in PvE from the mid-season patch that should be right around the corner, so all good things. I think this makes it important to compare to other kinetic scouts, as how it will compare to other primaries more broadly is a little tougher to forecast, which is why I mentioned Servant Leader and Nightwatch. Jury is actually getting a teeny tiny little perk refresh this season compared to the version we got last season, which was already a reprisal of a reprisal. The explosive payload in the 4th column will actually be replaced with kinetic tremors. This is a bummer to me. This is a downgrade to me. Scouts are weapons that are best used in harder activities, especially things like GM Nightfalls for their incredibly long range and frequent representation on the artifact. Kinetic Tremors is a perk that I feel lends itself really well to that playstyle, definitely lends itself most to that playstyle. However, I actually consider Kinetic Tremors to be a downgrade overall from Explosive Payload, like I mentioned, and here's why. Kinetic Tremors is going to require you to shoot the same target 6 times consecutively with Jury for it to activate. Perks that don't require a kill to activate, especially damage perks that don't require a kill to activate, are the most sought after perks on weapons for GMs and other high-end PvE, since you presumably won't be killing things as often as you would normally. So the fact that Kinetic Tremors only requires hits is definitely a strength of the perk. The thing is, 6 shots is kind of a lot. Most enemies are dead in 6 shot from a scout rifle, even in GMs. The argument for its usefulness against orange bar enemies is there, as is its merits against champions, since champions will most definitely live through 6 shots from a scout rifle in any level of content. And the Kinetic Tremors will actually inherit champion stunning functionality. It will do damage to barrier champions if we had barrier scouts, for example. The Tremors actually inherit all of the functionality of a normal shot and are able to proc perks like Subsistence or Shoot to Loot. The Tremors also flinch a lot and deal a pretty solid amount of damage, albeit backloaded damage, since you're still not getting any value out of the perk until you do get that 6th shot off. And then you need to wait for all the tremors to go off. And overall, there definitely is appeal, but I'm not crazy about it. And I'd still rather have the Omega consistent benefit from explosive payload on my scout rifle, personally. All that said, the gun gets other perks besides kinetic tremors, like Frenzy, which is, in my opinion, the best primary weapon perk in the game. If you're interested in a kinetic scout for endgame PvE and you either just want to try out Jury, or you don't have another kinetic scout that you like a good Servant Leader, or you don't have the new light campaign Nightwatch for some reason, then yeah, I'd be on the lookout for a Frenzy Jury. Just having that perk on its own, just having Frenzy, will definitely make the gun more than usable for the mega consistent huge buffs to reload and handling, as well as a respectable 15% damage buff, all that you're getting from Frenzy alone. If you do manage to bag multiple with Frenzy, I'd be looking for Shoot to Loot in the 4th column, or maybe Subsistence or Rapid Hit. Subsistence is kind of in endgame content, and if you have Frenzy up, Rapid Hit reload speed buff is likely just going to end up doing nothing. But they're both generally useful perks that suit the weapon well enough. And then Kinetic Tremors with any one of those 3 perks might also be worth keeping if you're interested in that. The gun's base stats are quite solid, and scouts generally don't need much stat attention outside of just reload speed, really, which we'll have plenty of. So I wouldn't worry about barrel mag and masterwork much, but when selecting barrels and magazines, I suppose fluted and tactical mag would be my top picks, just for their large overall stat bumps. And I mean, if you have an old Hung Jury with rapid hit and explosive payload or something like that, or any kinetic scout that you already like using, you definitely can pass up on Hung Jury. I don't think you'll be missing out on much, but it'll do more than all right for you if you're looking for just something different or you don't have one of those good kinetic scouts already. And you know what? While I'm at it, I guess it would be appropriate to talk about this season's Vanguard Ops just random drop that you'll probably get a whole bunch of from running Nightfalls or just doing the normal Vanguard Ops playlist, and that is the Nameless Midnight, which is another returning weapon that just so happens to also be a kinetic 180 RPM precision framed scout rifle, just like Hung Jury. The role rationale is the same as it was for Hung Jury, except this gun, as is the case with most of the core playlist drop weapons, gets an all-you-can-eat buffet of perk options with 12 in each node. That said, if you dig around, this gun gets some pretty damn good rolls, at least as good as Hung Jury. Just like with Hung Jury, Frenzy is here, Kinetic Tremors is here, but Nameless Midnight also has explosive payload, which, as I said before, is goated. There's also Adrenaline Junkie, which is a good one these days with all the grenade spam build. Third column isn't as impressive here, with Outlaw, Triple Tap, Slideways, and Perpetual Motion being the standouts. Outlaw is definitely the cream of the crop as far as those options go. Keepaway's right up there with it. If one of these drops for you with any combination of the aforementioned perks, I'd consider it. Same stipulations apply here as with Hung Jury, as they are so similar. If you already have a kinetic scout you like, you're not missing much. But this gun is way easier to get than Hung Jury, and you've probably already gotten a lot of them, which makes Hung Jury even less of a requirement to chase. The following week, week 2, we've got Heist Battlegrounds Mars making its GM debut, and it'll be dropping an offensively bad solar 55 RPM aggressive frame shotgun, the Mindbender's Ambition. This is a PvP focused gun, a bad one, but in any case, my 5 out of 5 for PvP would be course through rifling, accurized rounds, threat detector, fragile focus, and a range masterwork. Range and handling are the only stats we care about on a PvP shotgun, and we want a lot of both, especially with Mindbender's Ambition's abysmally bad base stats, as is typical for this archetype. Though, if you're running an exotic armor piece in PvP that boosts handling like Ophidian Aspect or Dragon's Shadow, you can afford to go all in on range and give up a little bit of handling. For barrels, keep in mind that Full Choke and Smoothbore currently provide very little benefit to the performance of shotguns, so I'd go for Barrel Shroud, Small Bore, or Corkscrew, unless you can get handling from elsewhere to make up for the stat loss from Rifled Barrel, which would then become the best choice. Accurized Rounds is the clear choice in the second column, as it is the only option that boosts either the range or handling that we were talking about. Threat Detector is an S-tier perk on shotguns for the massive handling boost that activates within 15 meters of an enemy, and since Threat Detector offers a duration scalar to handling, this actually will still benefit you greatly even if you are running some of those handling exotics that I was talking about. And it activates within 15 meters, which is roughly double normal shotgun one-hit kill range, which makes it quite reliable. None of the other options in this column even have comparable usefulness, so I shouldn't really need to sell you on it, but I digress. For the last perk column, Fragile Focus and Well-Rounded both have the potential to give us some extra range, but aren't exactly the big ticket perks we're looking for on shotguns. Fragile Focus gives 20 range until you take damage, making it a little hit or miss. Well-Rounded gives 10 range and 10 handling after dealing damage with a grenade or melee ability, which is also hit or miss. And in my opinion, more hit or miss than Fragile Focus is, so that's what I would go with. Range Masterwork is the best option with handling close behind, and now, unlike Hung Jury, because of those terrible base stats that come with a lot of drawbacks and limitations, we do really want to be looking for a perfect roll of this gun, or pretty darn close. It'll be quite usable if you do manage to land that 5 out of 5 roll, but farming for it isn't likely to be more worth your time than getting a pattern and crafting a craftable shotgun, or farming out one that just has a higher ceiling, like the Matador from Grasp of Avarice, for example. Finally, I'll mention that it does get 1-2 punch for PvE, even auto-loading holster to go with that, which is nice. We do have some other solar 1-2 punch shotguns in the game that, depending on what kind of player you are likely to be more accessible than Mindbenders, but Mindbenders is the only option that gets auto-loading holster. Overall, I'd say this gun is an instant delete without a perfect roll, quite honestly, and even then, is still an easy pass for me. Feel free to grab one if you want, or you just want to be reminded of Mindbender's former glory in the Crucible back in the day. They'll warn you, it's a shell of its former self that will thoroughly disappoint you. In week 3, we've got another strike making its GM debut in the new Nightfall strike, Hypernet Current, which will be dropping the Wendigo GL3. Wendigo got a lot of hype at the end of last season when it was farmable right after hearing about the big grenade launcher buffs coming with Nightfall. Now here we are, a few weeks into Nightfall. Actually, I even be months. I don't think anyone's actually using it. Optimal use of your heavy slot in PvE these days is reserved for a few different swords, machine guns, rocket launchers, and linear fusion rifles. So I'd really recommend just sticking to those until grenade launchers get another buff, if they do. They are usable, though, and Wendigo is probably the best of the lot. The 5 out of 5 for Wendigo, in my opinion, is quick launch, spike grenades, auto-loading holster, explosive light, and a velocity masterwork. Wendigo does get some other decent damage perks in the 4th column, but explosive light is really what makes this grenade launcher worth anyone's time. Explosive light does come with the caveat that you need to pick up an orb for every shot of the GL that you fire in order to get the damage buff. Nowadays, orbs are pouring out of everyone's ears, so this isn't usually an issue, but if it is, then the next best option is probably going to be Cascade Point. But if you don't bag either of those perks on your Wendigo, I think you'd just be better off with the Legendary Shards. 3rd column options are a little more open and will depend on how long the damage phase is and whether or not you're supplementing Wendigo with another weapon, like a sniper rifle, which I'd recommend you do, and therefore I also recommend auto-loading holster. Cloud cartridge, field prep, and impulse amplifier are all also useful. For launch and magazine perks, spike grenades is the clear choice because it literally gives you damage, though if the increase is marginal, if you also have explosive light for reasons pertaining to the nightmare that is grenade launcher damage calcs. With Cascade Point, though, spike grenades are kind of a requirement. You definitely want spike grenades. For launch perks, velocity and or handling are always going to be the best choices, and keep in mind that blast radius is a completely dead stat for boss damage on explosive light grenade launchers, and can actually hurt your damage on rolls without explosive lights, but with spike grenades, for more terrible dank GL math reasons. So just take my word for it. If you want to investigate that yourself or want me to make a video about it, let me know. Also, keep an eye out for a proximity grenade roll with maybe impulse amplifier and or rangefinder for PvP. Should do just fine there. Grenade launchers are pretty good in PvP. Overall, I would say you do not need to go out of your way to get yourself a good Wendigo. But if you fall into a couple, a good PvE and or PvP roll is definitely worth keeping. But I don't think you'll be missing out on much if you do not opt to farm for one. Week 4 of the rotation, we're getting the newly redone Arms Dealer Strike and the Militia's Birthright Lightweight Kinetic Grenade Launcher. With the perks this grenade launcher rolls, the only real way to kit it out is for dizzy nades, for disorienting nades, and it is one of the best kinetic GLs for that purpose, so that's good. 5 out of 5 roll here is going to be quick launch, dizzy nades, lead from gold or slideways with auto-loading holster and a handling masterwork. All you need for this GL to be useful is dizzy nades and auto-loading holster. Even arguably just dizzy nades, to be honest. Lead from gold is nice to keep up your grenades, keep those topped off just a bit better. Slideways is cool for a free slide reload every now and then. Keep in mind that this is different from the functionality present on the similar perk Slide Shot, as Slide Shot does not have an internal cooldown and Slideways does. Our masterwork and launch choices are centered around getting a ton of handling just to get the GL in and out of our hands faster so we can get back to slaying once all the ads are crying with their heads in the arms. It's not a game changer though if you miss out on some of those handling perks. Harden Our Dust from Dares of Eternity, Lingering Dread from Duality, and Ignition Code, which is also now dropping from Dares of Eternity, do bring down the value of Militia's Birthright quite a lot. If you have any of those 3 grenade launchers with one of their premier rolls and disorienting grenades, then you won't be missing out if you don't farm out a Militia's Birthright. But I do think that the roll of auto-loading holster, dizzy nades, and either lead from gold or slideways will always be worth keeping if you do happen to fall into it. And if you don't have any of those kinetic grenade launchers that I mentioned before with dizzy nades, I would definitely suggest you go get one, even if Harden Our Dust might be a little easier to get and is craftable. In week 5, we have the Glassway Nightfall, again, for like the 5th season in a row or something, and it is dropping Buzzard, which was a pursuit weapon from the Vanguard back in like season 8 or something. So another new but not new weapon. It is still a 300 RPM adaptive frame kinetic sidearm, but of course with random rolls and an adept version this time. Right off the bat, I'll say that Buzzard, to me, seems to have some really, really high potential in PvP, with some great perks and great base stats to leverage the blazing fast 0.67 base time to kill coming from the adaptive frame sidearm archetype. For PvE, sidearms are up for a 10% damage buff with the mid-season patch, and this is probably the best kinetic sidearm in the game, if only by a small margin. Currently, I and most of the player base would way rather use one of the many very good kinetic SMGs before using a kinetic sidearm, as SMGs occupy a similar range band. But after the buffs, this may not be the case, and sidearms may be some real players. It's too early to tell just yet, but it may be something to keep an eye on. So first, let's talk about PvP, where I think the Buzzard ceiling is really, really high, like I mentioned. In Column 3, we have Encore and Perpetual Motion, both fantastic PvP perks on just about any primary weapon. Perpetual Motion is going to be your go-to for consistency, as its effect is up pretty much all the time. Encore is going to have very high snowballing potential through the large stacking buffs to range and stability. In the 4th column, we have Rangefinder, which is another fantastic PvP perk on, again, pretty much any primary weapon. The main comparison with adaptive sidearms in PvP is, of course, going to be the Drang. And when looking at the stat package with Buzzard compared to Drang and compared to other adaptive sidearms, it's pretty damn good, to the point where I would say, obviously, if you manage to bag a very well-rolled adept version of the Buzzard with like a range boosting barrel, range boosting magazine, preferably ricochet, perpetual motion, or encore with rangefinder and something like a range masterwork, you probably just slap adept range on that thing and it's the best PvP sidearm in the game. And if you get a decent roll that has at least rangefinder, you should be hanging out with the likes of Drang. You should be right up there with it. For PvE though, since that's mainly what I care about, if you get one with Frenzy, I would say you can just call it a day. Overflow and Perpetual Motion would be a nice bonus in the 3rd column, and then just slot best available barrel and mag to boost range and either reload speed or magazine capacity. We do also have Kinetic Tremors on Buzzard, which I think is just an awful fit for a sidearm. Sidearms occupy a range band in PvE that is only out to about 20 meters, which is the shortest effective range primary weapons in the game. They make up for this in damage, and they do good damage, but you'll really be in the thick of it inside of 20 meters, and you might find yourself in situations where you need to close the gap a lot before you can actually even take advantage of that damage, and you may find yourself in situations where that just isn't possible. Kinetic Tremors is a backloaded perk, requiring you to land 4 shots on the same target with Buzzard before the Tremors start doing their thing. In content where you can safely get within sidearm range of enemies consistently without killing yourself, the enemies are dying to 4 sidearm shots, and Tremors isn't going to do anything. You can use it if you want, of course, just like anything in this game, but Tremors is going to get the most value on weapons with long range that you use in high-end content like GMs, where enemies are consistently living through the perk's activation time. So at the end of the day, with Buzzard, if you're a big PvP sidearm enjoyer, now's the time. This is a gun that you definitely need to go get. You're going to want to farm out a juicer on this thing. I forecast it as being the best PvP sidearm in the game with a 5 out of 5 roll. For PvE, honestly, I think a Frenzy roll would be a good way to future-proof yourself, or you can pick one up later on with something like a Nightfall Cypher if sidearms are really good after the mid-season patch. And to end off the rotation for the season, we have Lake of Shadows, which got a remaster that I hate. I don't know about you. You can let me know what you think in the comments, but if you ask me, it's pretty bad. And well, neither is the gun dropping from it's pretty bad too. The reissued Swarm, 360 RPM, high-impact arc machine gun. It's pretty bad as far as machine guns go. However, machine guns are really good as kind of workhorse super primaries, thanks to the availability of heavy ammo currently from Bricks from Beyond, and the sizable reserve buffs that machine guns shipped with in Nightfall. So, I mean, Through that lens, Swarm is usable because it's a machine gun, but it's not a good one. And this is mostly due to just an incredibly lackluster perk pool for PvE. My general rationale for perk selection on machine guns is that I do not want to reload the thing ever. I do not ever want to see that big, ridiculous, long 3-second reload animation. No matter how much reload speed you give me, it is just too long. That means that I want reload perks that reload passively in some way. And I'm not interested in reload speed boosting perks like Feeding Frenzy, which is the only perk Swarm gets with any sort of reload functionality. If Swarm had Reconstruction, Rewind Rounds, Demolitionist, Autoloading Holster, Subsistence, hell, even Grave Robber, then we might be talking. But it doesn't. It has Feeding Frenzy. In the second column, honestly, the perks are usable. Dragonfly's fine. Target lock is eh. Legendary machine gun DPS is still pretty bad as far as power weapons go, with or without target lock, so I'd pass there. If you really want an arc machine gun, I would go get a Fine Memorial from the Moon or a Terminus Horizon from Spire of the Watcher, and a decent roll of one of those is just going to be way better than even the best roll of the Swarm, so this one's a hard pass. So that's it. Pretty middling lineup of Nightfall weapons this season, if I do say so myself. Hopefully you learned something in this video. Hopefully you've got a good idea of what you're going to be looking for as the Nightfall rotation kicks off next week. If this video helped you out in any way, or you like the content, you want to see some more, please don't hesitate to subscribe. It helps me out a lot, really keeps me going. Leave a comment, like the video, and have a good one.